will try to provide clear sequencing of these priorities, talking about when, the urgency, and the feasibility of some of these adaptation options, working with the government in terms of what are the priorities that are being already identified and it's already working on the ground. These reports really are trying to also understand how much, and this is the question that we heard from the excellencies and the ministries, the need of new investments. We need to do things differently, and we might need to do different things as well. But how much and how can this be financed? So whole component understanding climate finance will be at the core of this report to understand the new opportunities, the new instruments that can be feasible.
To develop the first climate country development report for Mauritius. I will now invite Dr. Shamsu Rahaja, the World Bank resident representative in Mauritius, to deliver his welcome note.
Honorable Mr. Rajesh Anand, Minister of Environment, Solid Waste Management and Climate Change. Honorable Mr. Daneshwar Damri, Junior Minister of Finance, distinguished representatives from respective ministries, government bodies, esteemed partners from the private sector, civil societies, and development partners, a very good morning to you all. Welcome again to the kickoff workshop of the World Bank Climate Change Development Report. Let me start by saying that the issue of climate change remains a primary existential threat for humanity. Whether we are climate change believers or deniers, as some of us know, this issue has already created damage to millions of people on Earth and threatening our future. Now for Mauritius, fighting climate change has become an urgent issue. First, as we all know, because of the geographical position and island status, Mauritius is highly vulnerable to natural shocks such as drought, floods, coastal erosion, which cause substantial economic losses. Hence, a more climate resilient economy is needed to reduce the negative exposure of climate change to macroeconomy and also poverty. Second, we believe that development as usual will not be sufficient. We think building greater resilience to climate change will require doing things differently and doing different things. Structural reforms are needed to support Mauritius' effort to address the impact of climate change. These reforms are necessary to make sure that whatever action taken to address climate change do not derail development or push people back into poverty. Honorable guests, today we officially mark the start of World Bank work on climate change development, or we call it CCDR for Mauritius. This diagnostic tool were developed so that we can take an integrated look at development and climate while providing options and recommendations to enable countries to meet both their growth and climate objective in a Paris-aligned manner. The CCDR aims to raise several key recommendations to our member countries that they can put into practice. The work entails integrating national development plans with NDC, climate resilience plan, long-term carbon transition plan, and implementing processes prioritizing green, resilient, and inclusive development program. We also realize that the public sector cannot afford to do this alone. Therefore, CCDR will stress the importance of bringing in private sector as a frontline agents in climate change actions. Therefore, we are pleased to have International Finance Corporation as part of our institution to be in the team. Their presence will allow us to further explore opportunities in de-risking private capital, promoting public partnership, and deploying innovative financial instruments. Honorable guests, we fully acknowledge that Mauritian government, private sector, and development partners are already doing substantial work on climate change strategies in Mauritius. Therefore, we strive collaboration with all of you to ensure that the CCDR adds value to the discussion. And today our team hopes to engage interactively with all of you, seeking your views on key aspects on the climate change actions in Mauritius. Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, colleagues, as a development institution, the World Bank Group recently amended its mission from eliminating extreme poverty to ending extreme poverty and boosting shared prosperity on a livable planet. And we try to walk the talk. Last year, we are the largest provider of climate finance for development. We allocate about $42 billion US or 44% of our financing to climate adaptation and mitigation across our member countries. We leverage our balance sheets to assist member countries in addressing the unique challenge of climate adaptation and mitigation and realizing untapped opportunities from taking those actions. We also step up partnership with other development partners such as EU, ILD, African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, and many others to advance the mission. And let me close by saying that we are excited to start this process with you here today. We look forward working with you on building strong climate development policies and actions for Mauritius. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rahoja. In any sustainability agenda, the Ministry of Finance plays a pivotal role by serving as the architect of policies that enable climate action. We now welcome the Honorable Ganeshwar Tampi, Junior Minister of Finance, for his speech.
Honorable Rajesh Bhagwan, Minister of Environment, Solid Waste Management and Climate Change. Mr. Jamshu Rahoja, World Bank Resident Representative, Acting Financial Secretary, and senior officials of ministries, delegates of the World Bank, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, very good morning. First and foremost, the World Bank, thank you for having me here at the opening ceremony of this consultative workshop. The launching of the preparation of the first country climate and development report for Mauritius is indeed a laudable initiative, and also serves the purpose of the people of Mauritius to protect our environment. On behalf of the government of Mauritius, I would like to thank the World Bank for spearheading this important initiative, another milestone in our long-standing partnership. Ladies and gentlemen, we are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change, and perhaps the last generation that can do something about it before irreparable damage sets in. We, the present generation of Mauritians, are the trustees and custodians of the rich natural wealth of Mauritius. Allow me to humbly submit that the Mauritian nation is gradually but surely adopting behavioral change to its climate. What better testimony than the engagement of each one and every one of us in the resolution of the Wakasho oil spills. That was great. But now, let's make that environmentally conscious behavior part of our everyday life, dear friends. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a single mission: to protect and hand on an environmentally sustainable planet to the next generation. And here in this room this morning, our purpose is to protect and hand on an environmentally sustainable Mauritius to the next generation. 2 weeks ago, the President of the Republic outlined in the government program 2025-2029 a bridge to the future under the leadership of the Prime Minister, the importance of climate change. Climate change has been placed at the forefront of our agenda. The undertaking to include the rights of nature in our constitutional and legal framework demonstrates this government's commitment to fostering sustainability and climate change adaptation. We acknowledge our climate vulnerability. We have experienced the devastating effects of cyclones. Risks associated with more intense or more frequent cyclones cannot be ignored. We have also experienced flooding, the effects of which have unfortunately been aggravated by the outgoing government's lack of investments in infrastructure. Flooded homes, disrupted agriculture, and coastal erosion all serve as stark reminders of the urgency of action. Honourable guests, fighting climate change requires cooperation and willpower. Mauritius comes with a clear commitment to the way forward. The government programme, A Bridge to the Future, outlines our plan to address climate change. The core measures include: 1. The elaboration of sound climate policies and government practices, including the development of a coherent and holistic strategy, and the evaluation of the effectiveness of institutional, regulatory, and legal framework to face climatic risk and adaptation. 2. The setting up of a regional centre for research and education on climate change and socio-ecological transformation, which will act as a platform for the region to discuss and act on challenges posed by climate change and ecological threats. 3. Leverage of a foreign policy to advocate for greater access to climate finance. And 4. Introducing the concept of green budgeting and integrate the need to address issues associated with climate change in the budgeting process. Dear friends, I believe that the Country Climate and Development Report for Mauritius will provide thought leadership and insights into high-impact actions, cost and policy roadmaps for climate adaptation and climate finance. Regarding climate finance, at the COP28, the World Bank Group committed to increasing its climate finance from 35% to 45% of total lending for the fiscal year ending 30 June 2025. In this regard, we urge the World Bank Group to channel more resources, namely development finance, towards small island developing states so as to reinforce their climate adaptation and mitigation capacity. Additionally, we would like to express our disappointment with the present criteria for accessing climate funds. Financing institutions have adopted a GDP-based approach that does not capture the complexity and risk of climate change for small islands like ours. We seek climate justice. We request the World Bank to allocate more weight to vulnerability in its allocation of developmental finance. Such a change in focus could be a game changer for Mauritius and small island developing states whose climate finance needs are momentous. An important part of the GDP of Mauritius comes from sectors reliant on nature. However, I do not think that we have data yet on the impact of climate crisis on the economy of Mauritius. Can you imagine the impact of coastal erosion on the tourism industry, on jobs and the local supply chain vendors, on the inflow of foreign currency, foreign reserves, and balance of payments, on our GDP? Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out. Mauritius needs to mobilize finance. As a matter of fact, the climate adaptation measures contained in the nationally determined contribution are estimated at USD 6.5 billion, about 290 billion rupees, in the ratio of 1/3 local mobilization and 2/3 international mobilization. Thus, I will urge and make an appeal to the private sector to see opportunities through challenges and to unlock the green economy and blue economy as important growth pillars. Please, private sector friends, make strong commitments to ESGs to protect, conserve, restore, and sustainably manage terrestrial, freshwater, coastal and marine ecosystems. Speaking of ESGs, we are well aware that ESGs also impact macroeconomic stability and macro-financial stability. They impact the sovereign's capacity to respond to environmental and social challenges and climate risk. In fact, the latest Moody's ratings of January 2025 make reference to ESGs. Ladies and gentlemen, the government is engaging with the World Bank to make climate policy choices that will hopefully offer growth opportunities driven by technological innovation, sustainable investments, and a dynamic private sector. For a moment, let's analyze global trends. Clean energy is boosting economic growth globally. Clean energy accounted for 10% of global GDP growth in 2023. Why is this not the case in Mauritius? Can this become a possibility in Mauritius? This is no time for politics. However, it pains me to remind you that the previous government brought down the contribution of renewable energy from 20% to 17% and failed present and future generations. Totally unacceptable. The reason for bringing this up is for everyone to measure the magnitude of the task ahead. Private sector colleagues in the room, let me reiterate and emphasize the government's pledge to sustainable energy as the foundation of energy security and sustainability. In addition, the blue economy is another growth pillar for Mauritius with its 2,000 square kilometers of maritime economic zone. And for the green economy and blue economy to take off and succeed, green finance and blue finance need to be available, accessible, and affordable. In that context, I am pleased to advise that the Ministry of Finance has been working on the Mauritius National Green Taxonomy as an enabler of green finance. Likewise, we are all aware of the role of carbon credits in finance. And I am agreeably surprised of the interest and emergence, albeit nascent, of green carbon, and something I've recently started hearing, blue carbon, in Mauritius. I believe that we should explore these financing mechanisms further. Furthermore, the Ministry of Finance has been receiving technical assistance in the implementation of green budgeting for climate resilient and environmentally sustainable measures. Now, with so many partners in the room, I'd like to make an appeal to each and every stakeholder to engage with this growth-friendly government. Talk to us. Discuss your initiatives. The Ministry of Finance and Economic Development will be an enabler and a multiplier for climate resilience and environment sustainability. In the spirit of rebuilding public trust and confidence, I would like to share that I am privileged to be part of a credible and competent economic team under the leadership of the Prime Minister. It's a great learning curve. The reason I'm telling you this is because the Prime Minister's economic leadership succeeded in maintaining our credit rating with Moody's, despite inheriting a catastrophic economic situation from the previous government. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, have no doubt, absolutely no doubt, in this government's commitment and resilience under the leadership of the Prime Minister towards climate change. So I wish the World Bank's team a successful mission in Mauritius. And before I end, I would like to summarize 3 key points. 1, we owe it to our beloved motherland and generations present and future to preserve and build a legacy of climate resilient and environmentally sustainable Mauritius. 2, amidst all challenges, green economy, green finance, blue finance can diversify our economic base and become new growth pillars of national income and jobs. And 3, climate resilience and environmental sustainability are important for macroeconomic stability and macro-financial stability. To conclude, I will make a call to action. Dare to do. Long live Mauritius. Thank you.
Honourable Minister. Our next speaker is the Honourable Maurice Minister of Environment, Solid Waste Management and Climate Change. His presence this morning signals a national commitment to building a shared pathway towards sustainable development and climate resilience. Honourable Minister.
Honourable Daneshwar Damri, Junior Minister of Finance. Mr. Shamsu Rajaja, World Bank Group Representative for Mauritius. African Financial Secretary, Senior Official of the Ministry, and the World Bank, representative of the private sector, civil society, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Irodo. And I'm pleased to be in your midst this morning for the half-day workshop for the presentation of an overview of a country climate change and development report prepared by the World Bank Group. At the outset, allow me to extend my appreciation and gratitude through Mr. Rahaja to the World Bank Group for the long outstanding support that Mauritius has received from the bank on several projects and programs, including the setting up of a Department of Environment and the Ministry of Environment some 30 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past decades, the environment sector has evolved a lot, embracing subject matters that go beyond environmental management to more complex issues such as sustainable development, climate change, and circular economy, amongst others. It is therefore critical for us to assess our sector-specific concerns and challenges in a holistic and comprehensive manner. I understand that the report that the World Bank Group has prepared and which will be presented this morning sheds light on the climate challenges that the Republic faces and identifies the climate finance opportunities to mobilize resources, amongst others, in order to bring impactful solutions for the implementation of a development and a climate change agenda. As many seats, the Republic of Mauritius stands at the front line of the climate crisis, facing significant challenges despite contributing less than 0.01% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and have no historical responsibility for this crisis. Unfortunately, the trajectory of future climate trends at global level suggests a troubling escalation of these impacts for all, and in particular for small coastal states like Mauritius. In the past few years, we have been facing increasingly frequent and intense weather events, causing loss of life and property, heavy rainfalls and floods, or unfortunately followed by cyclic drought episodes. Since 1950, annual rainfall has decreased by 8%, which is about 104 millimeters per year. Presently, as you are aware, we're experiencing one of the most severe water stress episodes. Sea level for Mauritius has increased by 4.7 millimeters per year, and a rise of 1 meter is projected by the end of the century. Sea surface temperature is increasing, leading to coral bleaching and coral loss, up to 60% in certain lagoons, and significant decline in fish capture. Changing weather patterns are affecting crop cycles, and agricultural production is actually projected to decrease by 30% by 2050. These events can, in a very near future, become even more drastic, compelling us to review our development priorities and consider the safeguarding our citizens' lives and livelihoods are the most pressing need. Ladies and gentlemen, the government program 2025-2029 sets out a coherent and comprehensive strategy to address these issues so as to meet the needs of the present without compromising those of the future generations, founded on a just and people-driven transition to ensure an inclusive society. Aligned with this vision for a climate resilient and low-emission future, this government is committed to investment in adaptation and mitigation to protect its people to the environment and the environment. Government is committed to delink economic growth from the use of fossil fuels in order to achieve our NDC target of 40% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, 60% renewable energy in the energy mix by 2030. Our national climate change mitigation strategy and action plan will focus on the decarbonization of the energy, transport, manufacturing, agricultural, and waste sectors. We aim to boost investment in major renewable energy technologies such as solar, but also adapt innovative technologies. We are also aiming at effectively moving towards a circular economy and enhance the adaptation of energy efficient and conservation practices in the industry, the private sector, and at household level. However, adaptation to climate change is a priority for government. We need to promote nature-based and ecosystem-based solutions to address extreme weather event impacts on infrastructure, coastal zone management in the face of rising sea levels, and respond to worsening impacts of climate change in the agricultural and utilities sectors. We require climate technology solutions to enhance the implementation of our mitigation and adaptation programs, building climate resilient infrastructure to reduce expenditure for lost and damaged infrastructure, tapping into the potential of the ocean economy to provide alternative livelihoods for coastal communities, and adopting climate smart and climate resilient agriculture techniques to ensure food security while not stressing our limited water resources. To achieve these ambitions, goals and targets, funding, technology transfer, and capacity building to implement expensive climate change adaptation and mitigation projects will be required. Mauritius is committed to put in place and enhance the necessary frameworks to ensure sustainable finance flows, transparency, and good governance. In this context, I will make a pressing appeal to the World Bank Group to consider supporting the implementation of meaningful actions across the full spectrum of mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage in Mauritius. Specifically, the World Bank could enhance financial support to address our adaptation needs, which are projected to reach around $1.5 billion in 2030. This could include enhancing the implementation of high-integrity, nature-based solutions along the coastal zone, the water, food and energy nexus program, climate-smart agriculture, amongst others. We will have concrete adaptation strategies and closer estimates once our national adaptation plan is formulated and an investment plan is ready for implementation. Last but not least, as you are aware, in line with the provisions of the Paris Agreement, this year we will be reviewing our NDC and set our commitments up to the year 2035. The background work to review the NDC has already started, and in 2 weeks' time, my ministry will kickstart the consultation exercise of this important target-setting document. I'm aware that the daunting challenges raised by climate change cannot be tackled by operating in an isolated and disjointed manner. Which is why I would like to make an appeal to all, including our development partners, to ensure that we work collaboratively in partnership so that climate actions are implemented in an equitable and effective manner for the sustainable future of all citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, on this note, I have the pleasure to declare this workshop open, and I wish you all fruitful deliberation on climate justice. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Both ministers have mentioned it. We are a small island facing climate change. I will now leave the floor to Dr. Anna Buha, Senior Climate Change Specialist at the Environment and Natural Resources Department of the World Bank. She will guide us through the main objectives of the CCDR. Dr. Anna.
Bonjour, good morning, everyone, Excellencies, distinguished guests and partners. Thank you so much for being here. And as it was said before, we really have the pleasure to start the work that we will do to develop the work of the country and file a development report. But this is a process that the World Bank does in co-ownership with the client. So we really are seeking your help to guide us on the development of this report, to provide opportunities where the World Bank can really enhance the work, to really have a report that is comprehensive and it's economy-wide, as it was mentioned. So as we know, it won't repeat. We know that climate change could still and will continue to endanger the critical economic sectors in Mauritius and development small islands, but also it can derail really from the development pathway. So in order to address the structural challenges that we need to achieve development goals, it is really important that climate and development are linked, and how we are able to adapt and manage some of the opportunities that we have to diminish the risk, but also try to bring opportunities in that growth. So what is the Country and Climate Development Report? It tries to answer a couple of questions. Some of them is to really understand why. So why is climate change so important for development? Trying to bring what the governments are doing in terms of development goals and objectives, and understanding where the partners, the private sectors are building that development growth, but then understanding what are the risks that climate change can knock off that development pathway. It also aims to bring answers on what should be done to develop differently and when. It tries to present actionable recommendations to adapt to some of this risk, and how the transition of the economy can build a new productivity-led growth model. The report really will try to provide clear sequencing of these priorities, talking about when, the urgency, and the feasibility of some of these adaptation options, working with the government in terms of what are the priorities that are being already identified and it's already working on the ground. These reports really are trying to also understand how much, and this is the question that we heard from the excellencies and the ministries, the need of new investments. We need to do things differently, and we might need to do different things as well. But how much and how can this be financed? So a whole component of understanding climate finance will be at the core of this report, to understand the new opportunities, the new instruments that can be feasible. The CCD report then, as mentioned, really tried to understand, quantify, evidence-based. So we tried to bring the science, what are the best opportunity to understand risk, and understanding not only at the biophysical, so it's our key sectors, but also what is important at the economy and the livelihood and the human capital in those countries. Mentioned will work, and we try to identify at the sectoral level what are the options in terms of feasibility, efficiency, and cost. as I mentioned, explore the avenues to finance adaptation and mitigation co-benefits, and understand and identify what are the concrete sectoral and cross-cutting priorities in terms of investments and policies. This report usually has a more design that is throughout all the reports, but it's structured around 6 chapters, and I'll go in detail some of them, but it's really trying to understand what is the nature, the context of Mauritius and the country and small island development state, what is the commitments, the policies, the governance, the capacity of the countries in mainstream climate change. We'll dwell very specifically in key sectors to understand more the priority of these sectors in terms of the development pathways and the adaptation. We'll talk about macroeconomic implications and bring the opportunity of analytical-based modeling into to really understand the economy-wide perspective. We'll discuss and define financing opportunities to, once we understand and have a collection of these adaptation and risks, how we can bring innovative financing, and finally some recommendations of policy action that governments can take and trying to discuss priority and timelines. So very quickly, again, the first chapter is really where we are. What is the country in terms of climate change? Mauriitius has done a lot of work. We're really trying to integrate and prioritize what is the issues that we need to focus in this report. In terms of understanding the policy review, we really want to understand what is the institutional readiness, some of the policies and capacity, what are the strengths and the weakness of these policies and institutional capacity to really mainstream climate change, and the connectivity of how these policies are being implemented and gaps are being understood. We want to really dwell, as I mentioned, what we call deep dives. These dives are based on selected sectors that we will have discussions with you all to really prioritize the sectors that have high sensitivity to climate change, and also its high relevance for the resilient and green economy pathways that the new government has really set up to really base that structural transformation. We want to understand what processes really underlie those key sectors to achieve the country development goals. And we also want to inform at the sectoral level what could be some of the recommendations that can really reap development benefits from a green transition and ensure that Mauritius can attain the net zero goals and the adaptation and mitigation goals of the NDCs. In selections, the proposed selected deep dives is really to focus on the ecosystem services, is integrated landscapes. So we want to understand the issues of water, agriculture productivity, and integration of natural resources. What are the pros and cons? What are the trade-offs? What are the conditions that these landscapes are being intensification of the risks? We also want to focus on the blue economy, the fisheries, resilient marine ecosystems, and the ocean economy in Mauritius. So we will be doing a deep analysis of that sector. We also bring an opportunity and a lens to really focus on disaster risk resilience, focusing on the infrastructure, transport, technology, and energy transitions, and finally, a key aspect for Mauritius, a resilient tourism sector. So these 4 deep dives will try to, in aspect of integrated landscapes, it's really understand the nuances of what are these sectors are doing, all the strategies, but for example, capture what is important in terms of agriculture or water, in terms of water scarcity, how we are really focusing on increasing storage capacity, understanding droughts, and understanding of potential technologies, options like desalination plants. In terms of understanding, for example, the shocks to agriculture, what is the changes in crop production, what are actions that could be done in terms of irrigation needs and land degradation impacts, and of course the investments and the adaptations that we can put in each of these sectors. In terms of water, just to give an example, these are type of the analytical modeling that our teams are producing and starting to work. And this is one of the models and the analytical work is to understand more climate economic analysis for resilience in water. It's a model called CLEAR. We're really understanding what is the water dependency of each of the interdependent sectors depending on water. What are the shocks that will be continuous to suffer or will be increased in frequency? The country preparedness to address these issues under the water component, and then what are the impacts and opportunities that we can do. So these are just an example of how each of the sector will bring its own analytical components into it. In the blue economy and ocean economy, we will provide different components. So it's a biophysical assessment of the impact of climate change and projected change and future changes in examining the implication of this on coastal reefs and biodiversity, and really thinking in the longer term. We also build on existing scientific literature, but also trying to bring the nuances of what are the socio-ecological components and recommendations that can be done at that sector. On the disaster risk resilience, it's really the CCDR aims to look at the opportunities for the transition of the energy sector, understanding the goals of the country to achieve renewable energy, but really how we could work towards the roadmap for achieving those targets, and really while ensuring energy security. So it's not only an issue of low carbon growth and mitigation, but it's an issue of adaptation in the energy sector. It also really aims to look at the institution capacity for managing and protecting physical assets like the integrated coastal zone management. So we would like to look into detail about coastal erosion and coastal aspects. We also will work to trying to address through technology and digital an aspect of early warning systems and how this can really help to bring emergency preparedness responses. And we also try to assess gaps in everything that we call climate services for the most vulnerable populations. How are there at risk, but how can early warning systems and services can really bring policies for the most vulnerable and who's going to be most effective. And so then how do we bring climate finance that can reach at that level? And finally, in resilient tourism, this is where we're really partnering with IFC, part of the World Bank Group, and IFC then will be leading the aspect of understanding the deep analysis in the tourism to really aim to craft a new tourism strategy and work with the Ministry of Tourism to really analyze the supply, demand structures, how to evaluate the key related climate related threats, but also the opportunity in terms of what are the gaps and barriers to bring the green private sector investments and bring, as mentioned by honorable ministries, how to bring the private sector as a key partner in bringing that resilience and much needed opportunity to work together. Not only will we be working on these deep dives at the sectoral level, but we want to bring across the CCDR, across this report, cross-cutting enablers. And so we really would like to focus on the human capital. What does it mean in terms of education? What does it mean in terms of health? And in terms of social protection? So we have our colleagues from those sectors bringing the elements that are important. We will be working very closely with our country economists to really bring assessments and elements of macroeconomic modeling and elements to really ensure that macro-fiscal stability. And of course, our colleagues that are going to be working on understanding climate finance and instruments that can be great. So just very quickly, as I mentioned, focusing on the human capital, health, education, social protection services, and also services that need to bring opportunities for the population overall and productivity. Gender gaps and just transition would also be interesting points that we would like to discuss. Our chapter 4 means that macroeconomic. As you remember, the key aspect of this report is think economy-wide. And so what are the opportunities to interlink all these elements into in a way that can help us analyze the short and long-term impacts, but also on the overall economy. And in order to do that, we would like to work towards several scenarios and we'll have my colleague Andrew explain a little bit more after the break how we can utilize some of the modeling and how we will need your support to validate what we think about the future and how we portray these elements into this economic and macroeconomic assessments. Finally, in the climate finance, and this is now a key aspect of this climate change and development reports, really understanding what are the assessing the optimal debt and not debt instruments that we can bring to work with our partners and in a collaborative way. How to understand what are the programs that we can leverage private sector actions, what are the opportunities that innovative mechanisms such as blue sustainability linked finance can bring, what are the issues that can really help us de-risk and any subsidy mechanism and insurance, so that can ensure that the climate is really integrated in the way that we finance and we finance development overall. And finally, of course, we'll have some recommendations with prioritized actions, highlight development co-benefits, and any finance that can really bring the private sector as its core. Very quickly, just to say that the World Bank, and here we come with a large team. It's one of the few studies that the World Bank does that it brings the entire World Bank at your disposal. So we have a large team from different sectors. We have expertise, and then we want to work with you to really bring that together and, as I said, co-own this process. So we're starting the process now. It will take around May and July that really this ongoing consultations, and one of what we ask is that we have your focal points that we can really interact, and we would like to have this very active dialogue with the government. We will hope to have some preliminary results by July, and by September so we'll do a launch and dissemination with your guidance. On that note, I just want to thank you, and we'll have in the second part a discussion of some of the issues that we would like to get your guidance, your opportunities to work collaboratively, and then discuss more about the components of the macroeconomic model with my colleagues. So with that, thank you very much.